Hello, everybody. Shavua Tov. I hope you all had a wonderful Shabbat and that your week has gotten started off on the right foot. If you're joining us tonight, then your week has definitely gotten started off on the right foot as you have chosen to begin the week with Torah learning. So that's no small thing. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a popular Hasidic concept, and I'm excited to introduce it. It is, I think, an interesting tool to connect with God, to connect to Torah, one that you can find in a lot of Hasidic sources. So if we're talking about like what is like specific, like specifically Hasidic look on the tradition, like give me a specific Hasidic practice. What we're about to see is a great example of that. So I'm excited to introduce it, and I'm excited to talk about it together. We'll start with our Torah portion. It's the very first line of the parsha we read today, Exodus chapter 27, verse 20. And it starts with this. Ve'ata titzaveh et bnei Yisrael, v'yikhu elecha shemen zayit zach ketit lama'or, laha'alot ner tamid. Shalom, Bruno. It says, now you shall command the children of Israel, that they shall take for you pure pressed olive oil for illumination, to kindle the lamp continually. Shalom Yochev, shalom Harry. All right. Now, our parsha starts with this commandment to collect oil, special kind of oil, and use it to light the menorah, and that's not at all where the Kedushat Levi is going to go. So let's jump into it. Again, if you're new to our class, the text we've been learning for almost a year now is here, the Kedushat Levi, late 18th century Hasidic master. So he says this, Vayikhu elecha shemen zayit zach ketit lama'or, and you should take for yourself pure pressed olive oil for illumination. Near it. And let's see where he starts. Hayetzer hara mifatela adam le'ezet ta'avot ra'ot ve'ahava ra'a. It goes in a completely different direction than the text. He says, the Yetzer hara, we'll call it the evil inclination here, coerces a person to whatever, bad desire, the ahavara, or evil thing that this person loves. And I wish there was a better translation of ra than just bad or evil. But we're going to translate it like that. He starts with the Yetzer hara, saying that it just convinces us to do things and to like things that we really shouldn't. Our evil inclination, as compared to the good inclination, which wants us to study Torah, like you're doing now. You're starting the week by studying Torah, which wants us to go out and do mitzvot. The evil inclination wants us to do the opposite. That's how he starts this. That has nothing to do with our text, which is pretty awesome. Nothing to do with the shemen zayit zach ketit, with the pure pressed olive oil. Now, he says, and by the way, if you're just joining us, the teaching we're going to hear tonight is a popular Hasidic concept, one that is, I think, like uniquely Hasidic and an interesting tool to connect with God. So he starts by saying the Yetzer hara convinces us to do bad things. And this evil inclination of ours wants us to distance ourselves from serving God. That's what it wants to do. We want to do good things in this world. The Yetzer hara makes it very hard. Hatakana l'shaber oto Laha'alot kol hamachshavot v'kol hata'avot el hakadusha. But the fix for this, he says, and there's a solution, and he's going to give it to us, is to crush it and to raise all of those thoughts and all of those desires to a level of holiness. Shalom, my mom, Elaine, and Steve joining us in Florida. Shalom, Marvin. So there's a fix. The Yetzer Hara wants to convince us not to do mitzvot, not to serve God, but there's a fix, which is to raise it to a level of holiness. And he's going to tell us how to do this. Vayomar ha'adam el libo, and a person should speak to his heart. Ma im yesh li ta'ava el davar gashmiyut v'sichlu, just in the same way. This is the tool that he's going to give us. Just in the same way that I want this physical kind of foolish thing, mikol sheken sheyesh li liyo ta'ava el haborei ba'avodato. So too, all the more so, he says, that I should have this kind of desire for God and serving God. And he's going to talk about what this means. But im yesh li yira midvar gashmi, if one is afraid of something in the physical world, mikol sheken sheyesh li lior v'lif chod mipanav yitzparach, the more so I should use that to grow my fear, reverence, awe for God. That's what it is. If you have a desire in this world that has nothing to do with God or Torah, you say, just in the same way that I really want this, so too may it be my heart that you desire that kind of connection with God. Just in the same way that I'm afraid of this, physical thing, so too my heart may it be that you have that kind of reverence for God. That's the tool here, and it has a name, this tool, and he's going to give it to us. He says, Ve'az na'aseh hara kiseh el hatov. He says, by doing this, you make the bad a throne for the good. And I love this. So if you have a desire for something that has nothing to do with God or Torah, something that might actually distance you from God or Torah, you can say to your heart, just in the same way that I want that, may it be that you, my heart, want that level of connection with God. And it becomes like a throne for the good. And now he's going to introduce another thought in relation to this. He says, because of this, Asa Hashem Yitzbarach, we have to ask the question, why is there ever a time that we feel distant from God? Why is there ever a time that we have thoughts that take us away from being the kind of person that we want to be? That's a very hard thing to answer. If we're meant to pray and we're meant to do mitzvot, why did God create us in such a way that we should ever want to do something other than that? He says, God, this is God's desire. Because if everybody constantly served God, God would not have any pleasure from this. Ta'anuk tamidi eino ta'anuk, because pleasure that is persisting, pleasure that is eternal, non-stopping, is not pleasure, he says. But when there is some kind of distance, and then when one overcomes that distance, overcomes the things that block him or her from God, then God has a great pleasure from this. First of all, we have this idea that God takes pleasure in our connecting with God. And this is also a great Hasidic concept, the idea that God actually, the word here is ta'anug, has some kind of benefit, joy, pleasure from us praying to God, us doing mitzvot. God likes it when we do the mitzvot. But we need something that distances us, or else there's no real joy. And it's in overcoming those obstacles and yet still connecting to God, still, pursuing Torah, pursuing mitzvot, despite, the Yetzer Hara, despite those things that push us away from it. That's when God has a level of joy. Behine. And now he's going to go a level deeper and kind of reflect on his role as kind of the tzaddik here. And then we can imagine this for ourselves too. Hine hatzadik tzarich la'alot kol hamachashavot zarot. He says a tzaddik, a righteous person, needs to raise up all kinds of foreign thoughts. That's kind of the name of this tool, machashavot zarot, he says. Things that have nothing to do with God, Torah, or mitzvot. To raise them up. He says, sometimes it happens, even to the most righteous people. They have some kind of machashava zara, some kind of foreign thought, he calls it. And it's in order. That the tzaddik should raise this up in prayers and speech. And I want to remind you, this is not just a tzaddik, a righteous person, but it's a tool for all of us. Often we get thoughts that have nothing to do with God, things that pull us away from being our best selves. And he says this is in order to raise it. Remember, this comes from God too. That's the theology here. So then we need to do something with it. We can't, there needs to be a reason why these thoughts exist. Because God, in God's honor, also made these. Because if it wasn't the case that a tzaddik, somebody who's righteous, could help others also to lift themselves up, then God would not have any joy from that tzaddik. So he says there's two kinds of joy here. First, there's the joy in that God has when somebody overcomes obstacles to get to God, and they finally, reach that level of devekut, of intense closeness, where they have that, moment of connection. And then there's another step. He says, but somebody who works on that all the time, like let's say you're really good now at this practice of machashavot zarot, of taking any thought that has nothing to do with God, Torah, and Israel, and using it, as a kisei latov, as the throne of good, to lift, to use that in this special way to connect to God. If you're really good at that, then the goal is to help others get there, to lift others up too. It's not just about you. Aval. Lefi shema'ala b'nei adam, as kevan shemit rabba hasimcha idei hatzadik, shema'ala b'nei adam acherim, as gorem ba'ovedato simcha afhu bitzmidu. And he says, when somebody is able to consistently feel that connection to God, as he's imagining a tzaddik is able to do that. Remember, we said earlier that, pleasure that has no end is not actually pleasure. But it's possible, he says, to have that connection to God, but the joy that comes then is in lifting up others. Yochev, I'll translate your comments in a second. And now, by the way, you might have wondered how we're going to connect this back to the verse we started with about the Shemen Zayit Zach Katit Lamaor, about the pressed and beaten olive oil. And now, finally, after all of this talk about the Yetzer Hara, we have to ask, what did this have to do with the oil and the menorah? He says, Kol ha-machshava hu otiyot ma'eza ahava o ma'eza yar. He says, the root of all thought is really letters that have to do with that kind of desire or the kind of fear that you have. And I love it. It's almost like he's telling you like thoughts. Like we know computer programs are based in code, zeros and ones, and he's saying we can imagine our thoughts are similar. They're letters here. V'hine kol ha'machshavot zarot ba'im mima'anim tevirim. He says all of these kind of foreign thoughts come from what he calls things that are broken. Vehem nikraim otiot shvurim, and they're called broken letters. Kanoda. V'hatzadik tzarich laha'alot hakol, and the tzaddik, a righteous person, needs to lift up even these broken letters, even the broken thoughts here. V'zeu she'amar hakatuv, and this is what the Torah says, ve'ata titzaveh, in this verse, and you should command the children of Israel to take for you pure beaten olive oil for illumination, to kindle a lamp continually. He says this is what we're talking about here. Kol ha'machshavot, all of these thoughts, tehem nichlalim ba'otiyot, which consist of letters, tehem kaf zayin atvan. We're talking here about the 27 letters. Now, we said once that there are 22 letters, but then you take the sofiot, the end letters like kaf sofi, pe sofi, mem sofi, and you add those 5 and you get to 27. He says all of those thoughts, that's the 27 letters. Behem otiot zach, and then that's the zach katit. Zach is zayin kaf, and so you have 27, and then katit means beaten. And so you take the zach katit, those beaten letters, those broken thoughts, he says. Ratzalomar, otan ha'otio, that is to say, those letters, asher hem ketuvim u'shvurim, that are broken. Lama, or you use those to illuminate. Shetzarich hatzadik laha'alot v'limshoch lahem he'ara shel kedusha, and then a tzaddik needs to raise those up and to draw out from them a kind of holy illumination. B'kol zeh laha'alot ner tamid, and all of this is to light a flame eternally. In order to remember, and this is, I think, the clever read of this text. And I think we'll stop here at this point. He says, you take the zach katit, these broken letters, these machshavot zaro, these weird thoughts that have nothing to do with God, and you use them in a way to connect to God. You say, let's say you're afraid of something that he says is in the physical world, has nothing to do with God. You say, in the same way that I'm nervous about this, I want to feel reverence for God. In the same way that I want this, I have a deep desire for this thing that I, is not good from the Yetzer Hara. I should want a desire. I should want that same level of desire and connection to God. And he says, when you do that, when you take the zach katit, you use it to make a ner tamid. You use it to have a continuous connection to God. And so in that way, your connection to God is not just, when you're feeling it, when you're in prayer, when you are, studying Torah. It's when you're doing anything. And the possibility of having that, and this is like the trick, I think, the Hasidic trick to Dveikut. Remember, that's our key word this past year. Dveikut means this level of intimacy with God. You have to take every thought, the ones that draw you close to God and the ones that take you away from God. And then here, this is the trick, this trick which we're calling machshavot zarot, weird foreign thoughts. You take those and you make a ner tamid, and you use them to light this flame, this illuminating holy connection back to God. So that's lesson 1 tonight. This idea of machshavot zarot, which you'll find it in a number of Hasidic texts. It's you can't have a continuous deep connection to God if you don't uplift those things and those thoughts that take you away from God. Because if you do that, then you're only connecting to God half the amount of time that you might. Now, Yocheb, I'm going to translate your comment. He says, I'm grateful that God has pity. Even though God never has enough merits, Hashem does not abandon, even though one does not have enough merit, God does not abandon him. He does not let us face the battles alone. God gives us the tools to fight. Yes. I love that. Yeah. Yeah, we have the tools. It's just a matter of using them. And it's tough. And then Marvin, you said, nice thought. God will never give us anything that we can't control. He'll give us the tools, and it is up to us to know that they are God's and to grab them. Yeah. First of all, I'm thrilled, Marvin, that you know Portuguese. And I wonder, I don't like it. I'm nervous to say that God gives us things we can't control, but God, that's why this is such a good tool, because when we feel, pulled toward the physical things in this world, we can use it to connect back to God. And when we're so far distant from God, we can use that. You can use that distance, as a kisei lato, as a throne back to God, as a throne for good. Yochev replied to Marvin, saying, it's good to know that God allows our failures to help others to win their struggles. Because they will see that each day we gain strength and courage from God to fight against the Yetzer Hara. Yeah, this is the tool. This is the weapon against the Yetzer Hara. This is the tool, the Hasidic tool. This is such an important piece of the Hasidic toolbox. In this battle, so to speak, against the Yetzer Hara. You take it and you use it as we've said it before, I'll say it again, a kisei latov. I didn't make that up. That was the Kedusha Levi. You use the Ra as a throne for good. The evil as a throne for good. Marvin, the joke about the guy that prayed and God sent a bow. I love that joke. And then, Mom, you said, makes me think of the fact that the broken tablets were also kept in the Aron. I love that. Yeah, it's a good reminder that, in the Ark of the Covenant, there were the tablets that Moses wrote himself, and there was the tablets that God wrote that Moses broke. You need both. Exactly. You can't just, if you're, again, and then I want to share one more small teaching from this week's Parsha. If you're waiting, for those perfect moments of connection, for that to be your relationship with God, then you're only getting there half the time. We can use those moments, those things that actually take us away from God, also as a way to connect. Great little tool from the Kedushat Levi. Now, we spoke a little bit about lifting up others and helping others in their, quest for spiritual meaning. I'm going to share this very nice teaching, short teaching, and then I'll wish you all Shavua Tov. Later on in the Parsha, V'asita bigdei kodesh la'aharon achicha lichvod otif aret v'yata tedaber el kochoch elev v'asu bigdei aharon l'kodsho, and you shall make holy clothing for Aaron your brother, for honor and beauty, and you speak to those who are wise of heart, and make Aaron's clothes for likod show, to sanctify him. So his comment says this: Nira ki Moshe kidesh et Aharon. We see that Moses sanctified Aaron. Shea Aharon levush lekdusha v'richu. That Aaron should be dressed for in order to serve God. Ki nishmat hatzadikim hema kelim lemidat elyonim. Because the soul of the righteous ones are vessels for the service of God. V'zeu v'asita bigdei kodesh laharon. And this is why Moses was said, you should make holy clothing for Aaron your brother. She'eh minishmat Aharon bigdei kodesh, because the clothing themselves would be from kind of an extension of Aaron's soul. And this is kind of this nice comment that I wanted to share. Perush lechavod tifaret hainu kedusha brichu v'shechinte, and we see that you should make it. This is not yet the comment that when it says for honor and for holiness, this is none other than God's self. So this beautiful idea that the clothes are an extension of Aaron's soul, which is a vessel to serve God. But then he says this lovely comment at the end. And those who are wise of heart, asu malbushim, they make the vestments of Aaron themselves. Lachem la'el kativ, in that end of in the beginning part of the pasuk, it says you should make these le'aharon, for Aaron. U'b'chochmei lev, when it talks about those who are wise of heart, it just says Aharon. So if you listen closely to the verse, it says, Moses, you make clothing for Aaron, le'aharon, and those who are wise of heart, ve'asu bigdei Aharon, make Aaron's clothes. It doesn't say make clothes for Aaron, but it says those who are wise make Aaron's clothes. And what the Kedusha Levi does, he says that's no accident. Moses made the clothes for Aaron, but those who are wise of heart actually become like the vestments that Aaron wore, and they enable Aaron to serve God. And I think for us too, when those who are wise, as we saw in this last comment, almost have a responsibility to help others. And I think all of us, by the way, have wisdom to offer this world. And when you are in feeling fulfilled yourself, then he says it's time to look outward and ask yourselves, what can I do to help uplift somebody else? And you become, in the same way that Aaron could not have served God without these clothes, so too, there might be something you offer somebody that helps them to reach their potential that they could not have done in and of themselves. So I thought that was just a nice teaching, a nice way to end. Great kind of creative read on that text. Okay. Shavua Tov, everybody. I will wait just about a minute in case there are any questions, comments, concerns, and then I'll bid you all farewell and Shavua Tov. Yeah, Marvin, I agree. The more you do for others, the more you find value. Yeah, I think that's definitely a really meaningful thing to do. I know it's why I love teaching. It's why I know so many of you, feel, and me too, feel so uplifted when you give tzedakah, when you help another person. Oh, Marvin, that's great that you live in Brazil. I did not know that. Well, Marvin, meet Yochev. Yochev is in Brazil and joins us often. So come to our programs on YouTube and feel free to chat with each other, and I'll try to keep up. All right, everybody. Shavua Tov, and I look forward to studying again soon. Bye, everybody.